So I do want to turn over to kind of a general discussion now for all of us, and I'd really love to hear from folks if you haven't had a chance to say anything. What's that? Oh, to ring the bell. I'm ringing the bell, vocally ringing the bell. Hello. So do want to turn this over to kind of a general conversation now, and if folks who've been here all day, I wanted to say thank you. I know that we've covered a lot of territory today, and I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts and reactions of some of what you say is opportunities for women in science, particularly going forward. But before I turn it over to our discussion, I do want to thank a couple of people, if you'll allow me that moment. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our facilities staff, particularly Jeremy and Todd Schoenrock, who have been dealing with a play all week. We've had multiple events happening on the APS campus this week and really have gone above and beyond. They always do, but in more ways than one. The technology was funky this morning. So many, I mean, they are the unsung heroes, honestly, of today's event. So if you'll join me in thanking them for all that they've done. And then somewhere across the street, I think, setting up the reception is Thomas Johns, who I think all of you have emailed with. Working with Thomas is one of the sheer blessings of my life now. So if he can hear this, wherever he is, thank you, Thomas, for all the things that you do. Wanted to thank other APS staff, Brenna Holland, Jess Frankenfield, Bayard Miller, my colleagues also in the Library and Museum, the folks who are involved with the really fantastic production of Emily Defends Her Life Tonight for providing the kind of opening kickoff event for this. So a round of applause for them. And then thank you again to all of you for such delightful conversation. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Alexis and to Michelle to kind of get us started in this final moment of kind of reflection and conversation. So the way we typically think about this is, we talked about a lot of stuff today. What kind of stood out to you as both things that cut across different panels, and then what was missing to you? So I don't know, maybe Alexis, I'll start with you. And
that's a good question. First of all, this has been such an excellent experience. I met so many fantastic people. I feel like I'm like vibrating on a very high frequency, so this is awesome. I think it's interesting, when I first started working in this field like years ago, there was the whole, it's just about girls seeing, women working in science, right? And that was sort of like it began and ended there. And I think about that now as that was a way to open the door, but I think the thing we struggle with is what that actually means to play out. So especially a lot of the issues we were talking about in this last panel about, what does it mean to have flexible work policies? What does it mean when we talk about pay equity? What does it mean when we talk about, all of those kinds of issues? That's what it takes to have this actually become true, that like this is a diverse workforce. We're seeing women, we're seeing LGBTQIA, we're seeing all sorts of diversity. Like all of that is part of the conversation. And I think the thing that we actually have to grapple with is like, that means like putting our money and our policies where our mouth is, and like that's the thing that I think we're not prepared to do. Like we would love to talk about things in theory until we're blue in the face, right? And that's all really, really lovely. But like at the end of the day, if somebody's not like, okay, this is how we deal with pay equity, this is how we deal with like all of that doesn't really matter, right? So I think that's something I'm just reflecting on, is like, actually what's all the hard stuff that we still have to do? And like, I don't mean that as a downer, like this was excellent, this was great. But I think about that from an institutional point of view. So that's where I'm.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really think too, there was the slide that someone put up with, the women at Scripps would like the same thing the male colleagues have, and will just cost a few $1 million, which Scripps probably has, right? So, but how much are we willing to pay for this kind of equity? I thought a couple of things about this. One was this notion that seemed to cut through so many of the talks about identity. What is our identity? Is our identity as scientists, our identities as parents, our identity as artists, the things that we do that maybe don't, quote unquote, count as science, but somehow contribute to our science. So what does all of that look like? And can we really say, we claim our full identities? And I think we're a long way from doing that. And the what's missing, I think, we sort of touched on this at the end. Allison brought it up. It's these broader issues. I mean, I think about a male colleague, mid-career, who lost his husband and is now suddenly the parent of a, elementary school child. And he's finally had to go down to part-time. And it's been a long battle with his university to get there. I'm thinking about all of the accommodations that we make. There's still this hidden cost of having to negotiate them. It's like if you want to go to the conference and make use of the child care, you have to find the child care, or you have to sign up for the child care, you have to travel with the child. There's all this hidden cost to taking care of some of these things, and we're still not talking about that. So that may be, for me, one thing that's missing.
So one of the things that I keep reflecting on, and this actually started with I saw the play twice, and I liked it so much on Tuesday, I decided to do it again last night. But the talk back on Tuesday night was I was really struck by just the kind of intergenerational conversation that organically came out of the play, and the different ways that different age groups latched onto that conversation. And I've been thinking so much during this event, and I have these schemes when I put these programs on, but I really value this word inter that kind of happened in this event: interdisciplinary, intergenerational, intersectional, and I see that as the biggest opportunity coming out of the programming that we've been doing at APS for building partnerships in the area, for building partnerships with all of you, and for kind of thinking outside of the box and actually producing models for how to do that in ways that are constructive. So to me, that has been the most exciting takeaway. So the one thing that I found was absent in this, and I was aware of it in organizing the program, and I'm grateful to our colleagues from Israel for being here, was that opportunity for more international, speaking of inters that weren't represented, international dialogue, that there does need to be more occasion and space given to thinking about what do these conversations look like, not just in the United States, but around the globe, and how to build those initiatives. So. Yeah, I don't know. Should we open up the floor? I'm happy to hear from others.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down with the mic. No, you guys sit. I'll go down.
Okay.
I was all set to go.
Yeah. I stretched. I was ready just in case.
Yeah. I'm coming. I have to keep walking. I'm like a shark if I sit.
You're getting all your steps in, all the steps. So I want to answer your question about like what cut across and what is missing, and it's somewhat the same thing. And it was the repeated metaphor of the leaky pipeline. I just did an oral history with Rhonda Franklin, who is this fabulous woman in microwaves. She's just amazing, so much. But in her oral history, she specifically said how much she hates that metaphor because she's like, it makes it seem all so linear, that you have to go through this, and this, and there's clear places where you drop out. And obviously, yes, there are. That's something that's data that you can think. But what she would prefer is the idea of pathways, that there are many pathways in, and it doesn't have to be linear, because in her argument, clearly, one of the holdups to getting a degree in electrical engineering is you first have to pass calculus. Well, it turns out there's like a whole lot of electrical engineering where you don't need calculus. So can you get in there some other ways? There are other things to do with that. And as that idea of pathways, and her point is that she wants to have many different pathways into the field of engineering for you. I actually think on the other end of that pipeline about the many pathways outside of that. And so I was talking with several people, with Amy and Diana, about this identity, and when do you stop being a scientist? When do you stop being an engineer? Because so many people in the history who work as historians of science and technology are ex-engineers, are ex-bench scientists, ex-field scientists. And yet you don't lose that background knowledge. You still have that education So when, what is the, 20, 30, 40 years of your life that is not your identity as whatever it was that your college degree was in?
Strong reaction.
That was quick.
This is my favorite part of the day, where I just hand people.
Thank you. That's so true. I hadn't thought of that. I am an engineer by training. I did all my schooling in engineering, and now I teach microbiology. And I don't think I would be the type of microbiologist I am if it hadn't been for my engineering education, because you learn how to think in a certain way. But in terms of what is missing, I have to agree with Josie. It's men. Men are missing in this discussion. And my dream for the McNulty program is that we come to a time where we don't only have leadership training for women, but we have training for men on how to interact with women that are better or as good as them. And that's going to be the point in which they are going to be able to contribute to the change. So I'm all for change comes from within. Of course, change also comes from policy change, institutional change, but change has to come from within. And how are men gonna change if we don't teach them how to? And if we don't expose them to work with women and teach them how to work with those women? So that's my dream for my program. And I hope that more people think about incorporating men in this process in a way in which they can understand the process.
My
Go
husband teaches at a women's college, same one I do. And after he went to his first meeting where he was the only man in the room, he said, every man should go to a women's college.
Agreed.
No, I love this. Oh, yay, okay, good, there's more.
So I was just reflecting on it as well, and one thing I wasn't able to mention during the great coughing fit of 2023 was where, when we initially started this internship program, we're talking about the leaky pipeline, and right, Allison just mentioned it, and Amy was mentioning it too. We've stopped saying leaky pipeline because it's such a passive interpretation of what's happening. This pipeline isn't leaking. We are actively putting barriers in front of women and marginalized genders and making it so that they can't get to places they want to be in STEM. And I think we're talking about institutional change, and Amy talked about it, but there are such larger structures at play that it just keeps making me think of, how are we going to dismantle capitalism and the patriarchy and get to the place that we need to be? Because a leaky pipeline is just so passive, and it's just such active barriers being put in place here. And it's just reflecting on that today, it's something that I wish that I would have been able to sort of say more about, is that there's fight to be done, and there's things that we're going to need to much more actively do.
Coming to you. I'm coming.
I love that you said that. I really, because if we made this thing, then we can unmake it. And that gives us some amount of power in it, as opposed to, like you said, acting like it's a thing that has happened to us and now, that made my whole day.
Yeah, and just to build on that there, the barriers that are there, we can, for your next conference, really focusing in those barriers. We look at, I felt like there was a little bit of a lack of diversity, right? And we didn't talk about class, the intersectionality of economic class and the opportunity to study, to go to some of these summer programs, to, just everything, to even just get there, right? We talk about transportation, especially in rural areas. So there's just so much to pick apart there, besides just the patriarchy.
Okay, coming. This is good. You guys keep me going back and forth across the auditorium. I'm going to sleep. I slept terribly last night, so I'll be good tonight.
Thanks a lot. I was almost flabbergasted that, the Israeli, the Weizmann Institute that presented that about 33 or 30% of the women don't even go for the family leave, because they feel pressure to continue with their jobs and somehow manage otherwise. But also another thing too, the idea of negotiation, that you have to negotiate for some of these things on a forever. And I just don't know how the actual negotiations are conducted, if you have to go to the department head or through the, anyway. My point actually is that I was very fortunate that I belonged to a union, that I did belong to a union, and I was retired from a union. So that a lot of things that possibly had to be negotiated were negotiated for me through business agents and through other people that were helpful in that area. So that's one point. Also, another thing, too, that I was just curious, how many universities actually have daycare centers that actually, that are providing that kind of, support to the faculties, not necessarily just in STEM, but just in general. So if you could give me some kind of information, I appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to take it back to our colleagues from the
gonna
University
say,
of Delaware.
yeah.
Do you guys have some figures? This is what helps when you know everybody in the room, basically.
Unfortunately, the number of on-campus childcare centers has been declining. Yeah, so in part, I guess, neoliberal ethos of the market takes care of it is we don't want the liability of having a daycare, or we don't need classroom space, right? So we're going to kind of, seek other options. So that's right. We're going through some things at UD here. Sorry for that perspective. But yeah, so it's below 40% at this point. It's been
Well, and to be clear, when universities have childcare, like UD has childcare theoretically, but they only allow like 10% of the faculty to put their kids there. And then your kid has to have been born in the right month because they're doing research there. And it's not, even if this 30% number is a false number, because there's a lot of institutions that don't have sufficient childcare.
All right. Allison Marsh wants to get in on this.
So in my bio, I'm listed as the co-director of the Ann Johnson Institute for STS, and it's a relatively new institute, and I'm co-director. That was a clear choice, and my fellow co-director, Leah McClimans, is out of the philosophy department. She had, when we started the institute, she had 3 kids under the age of 7, and my mother had just moved in with me, so we had 2 ends of the spectrum of trying to figure out how this all worked. But when we basically have an endowment, we were setting up a new institute, and we're like, how are we going to spend this money? And we looked at structural barriers to collaboration, and childcare kept coming up, and then I threw in elder care because I was like, got to push that. But we kept bringing childcare to we had money, and we wanted to fund childcare for all after work hour programming events that we had. And the university kept saying no, 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 because of liability. They're like, we're like, well, what if we just give them money to hire their own babysitters? And they were like, no, you cannot do that. So if you sort of think about like all of the ways that universities can say no to things. And so in the end, we actually sponsor childcare at conferences. So if you go to the PSA or to HSS and you see like childcare options, some of that money is coming from us.
Which PSA?
The Philosophy of Science Association.
Yeah, there's Diana in the back.
Yeah, there's someone.
Oh, Diana, coming to you. My feet are getting tired.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is sort of against your point, I suppose, on the giving the university's just giving you money to use it. We did at University of Maryland. We've had a partnership with Care.com, and they just give us a blanket amount of hours, and you can use it for any kind of caring responsibilities. And you can use it for spring break, for schools, you can use it for sick days, you can use it for whatever. And I think it's not enough hours necessarily to cover for all the things that could happen, but it's sort of a nice buffer where if you just really need, and it's been nice because it doesn't discriminate between the kinds of caring responsibilities that you have, and it does allow you to either go through their system, they have a person who helps you pair up with an existing daycare, for instance, or you can use your own childcare or elderly care taker or whatever. So I don't know if other people can advocate for that in their institutions, but I think that's worked decently well.
Tamar, jumping in. I'm coming fast.
just to answer one thing. In the South, many places don't have unions, but that's an aside. But what I wanted to say, and this is more really inclusive for anyone really, faculty that are 9-month appointments, unless somebody else is different, they only get sick leave, not personal days, because the assumption is that the summer is the holiday. So if you want to take somebody to the doctor, or if you want to chaperone a zoo trip, you're miraculously not there, right? I mean, there's no honest way to do it because there's no ability to take personal days. And that goes for any kind of situation, whether you need to drive to a specialist. Well, I guess if you need to go drive to a specialist, a doctor, that's a medical thing. But anything besides medical is not. And so that's also a climate and a culture of how do you take days off during your appointment.
I'm bringing it back, but if folks in the room who haven't had a chance to speak yet would like to add anything to the conversation, we're running low on time, so please wave at me. That's okay. Go for it.
I was just going to say, I wanted to connect this back really fast to history education. And a lot of the things that I've been hearing all day, and that a big part of this last panel and conversation, are in alignment with a lot of historic change, catalyst moments or organizing moments throughout not just our history in the US, but histories writ large across the globe, especially when they're led by folks of marginalized genders, especially when they're led by mothers, especially when they're led by folks that we are talking about and advocating for today. So I think whenever I am sitting with policymakers or action makers, and I encourage people who work for history organizations to see themselves in that space. Nonpartisan does not mean that you cannot talk to people making decisions. It means you can't campaign for a specific candidate. It's very different in the 501c3 standards. So just to be clear, you can do this work, and being able to show that lineage of activism and organizing in all these spaces that all of you are continuing in such important ways, I think is an amazing grounding space to be, and a privilege that as history educators and historians of science, but historians writ large in particular, can pull upon to ground a lot of this work. So it's just really inspiring to see it continue.
Anybody else? Okay, well, maybe then I'll take this opportunity to invite you all to have a beverage with me and a toast across the street at the exhibition. Thank you all. Thank you to Michelle and Alexis for moderating. Thank you all for presenting. Thank you for coming. Come have a drink.